Greetings everyone, I'm Adam Haritan. This is a black morel mushroom. This is a half-free morel mushroom. Now I'm finding a lot of these in western Pennsylvania. It's mid-April, and every year around this time I get a lot of comments and questions and concerns from people who want to improve their chances of finding morels. Now over the years I filmed and posted 10 to a dozen different morel mushroom videos, so I've said a lot on the topic already, but apparently I haven't said enough. So what I'm going to do in this video is reiterate some of the foundational advice and tips that I've undoubtedly given in previous videos, but I'm going to say again, because sometimes with advice we hear things and we say, yeah, I get it, but we don't actually absorb it and implement it. So hopefully after watching this video, you can absorb some information that maybe you haven't heard before, or maybe you have heard before, but you can implement it this year and improve your chances of finding these delicious mushrooms. The first thing that I'll say about finding morels is that if you really want to find them, you have your heart set on finding them, you have a burning desire, you will do what it takes to find them. You will find them because they're not the hardest things in the world to find. Every year people find morel mushrooms. Every single year people find them. Think about finding a Sasquatch. That's hard. People spend their whole entire lives trying to find one single Sasquatch and never find one. Or think about finding the fountain of youth. Like the true fountain of youth, not those fake fountains of youth, but the real one whose waters grant longevity to anybody who drinks from them. Or think about finding the origins of the universe. That stuff's hard. Now compare all that to finding a morel mushroom. Doesn't seem so hard after all. Now you might have to go to some extreme measures to find them depending on where you live. You might have to drive 100 miles west or 400 miles south, or you might have to call up every single person in your network to help you out. But if you really want to find them, you will do what it takes to find them. Having said that, there are 3 important factors that we can keep in mind to help us improve our chances of finding morel mushrooms: luck, persistence, and skill. Now luck is a big factor because sometimes you just get lucky. A lot of people just get lucky. They have no knowledge of morel mushroom ecology, no knowledge of how to even identify morels. They just stumble upon something and say, what is this? And people are like, oh my God, you found morel mushrooms. How incredible. And they said, I had no idea. And that kind of happened to me many years ago. So maybe 14 years ago, I literally just drove to a spot without any real knowledge of morel mushroom ecology, got out of my car, started walking around, and within 10 to 15 minutes, I started finding a bunch of morels. And every year I've been going back to that spot, and nearly every single year, the morel mushroom hunting in that spot has been very good. Now, if you want to improve your chances of finding morels, it's important to put in a lot of work. So that's where persistence comes into play. You have to put in a lot of legwork. If you just sit at home, if you just look at pictures online all day of morels, you're never going to find them. You have to go outside and walk and look and explore new areas. The more times that you do this, the greater the chances that you are going to find lots of morel mushrooms. Skill is also important. There are a few skills that we can develop to help us improve our chances of finding morels. And the first one is learn tree identification and learn which trees grow in association with certain morels. Now it's true that people will seemingly find morels in the most random places, and that happens every single year with a lot of people. People will be looking all day for morels, then they'll come home and just find morels growing in their backyard. And that happened to one of my friends. He was out looking all day, came home, and the morels were literally growing right next to his driveway. Sometimes you'll find morels growing in association with trees, and nobody's ever found a morel growing in association with that particular tree. So that can happen. But generally speaking, there are certain trees that tend to associate with morels more often than other trees. And where I live in the mid-Atlantic, northeastern portion of the United States, some of those trees include American elm, slippery elm, tulip tree, apple, white ash, bitternut hickory, and black cherry. Now people also find morels growing in association with cottonwood, American sycamore, and black walnut. So those are the trees that I would pay attention to. Now another question to ask yourself is, well, what do all those trees have in common? And in what habitats do those trees grow? Because when you ask that question, now you're starting to pay attention to the bigger picture. You're starting to pay attention to ecology. And what you notice about all those trees is that they tend to grow in fertile habitats where the soil is either neutral in pH or slightly alkaline. Generally, those trees aren't growing in very acidic habitats, and they're not growing in very dry, infertile, rocky habitats either. So when I'm looking for morels, I'm not spending a lot of time on dry, rocky ridgetops. I'm not spending a lot of time in very acidic bogs. I'm spending time in floodplains, I'm spending time on the slopes leading down into floodplains, and I'm spending time in areas that were formerly farmed, then left abandoned. So that's where you tend to find the old apple orchards, and you're seeing ash trees in there, you're seeing tulip trees, you're seeing other trees that tend to associate with those fertile habitats. Two additional factors that are important to pay attention to include timing and weather. It's important to know when the morels tend to appear in your neck of the woods. Where I live in western Pennsylvania, this is typically late March through early to mid-May, give or take a week or two. So there's probably a 4 to 5 to 6 week window where the hunting is pretty good in the general area where I live. Where peak season might be 3.5, maybe 4 weeks. So I encourage you to pay attention to what is the timing like in your area where you live. Also pay attention to weather. If it's really, really, really dry, you might not have a good morel season because like other mushrooms, morels respond really well to water. This year, it's been really, really, really wet, and so far, the morel mushroom hunting has been really good. So pay attention to timing and pay attention to the weather. Now, when it comes to finding morels, there's a really important piece of information to keep in mind, and it's that some areas are just more productive than others. And you might happen to live in an area that is great for certain wildflowers, it's great for orchids, it's great for white-tailed deer hunting, but it's just not that good for morel mushrooms, and that's not going to change anytime soon because of the climate, because of the hydrology, because of the geology. And this goes back to the first point that I mentioned. If you really want to find morels, you will move to an area that has lots of morels. Like, you will do what it takes. Now look, I'm not saying you have to sell your house and move. I'm just saying you would have to drive 200 miles to the west or 400 miles to the northwest or to the south in order to get into these very productive areas. So when you're online and you see these photographs of people finding hundreds, if not thousands of morels in a season or sometimes in a week, keep in mind that in many cases, these people just live in areas that are very, very productive because of the climate, because of the geology, because of the hydrology. And it's going to be that way for a long time. It's been that way for a long time in the past, and it's going to be that way for many years in the future. Now, having said everything that I've said about morels, you might be under the impression, because maybe I've been giving you this impression, that morels are the most important things in this entire world. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true at all. I don't know anybody who considers a morel mushroom to be the most important thing in this world. Family is more important, friendship is more important, being a loving person is more important, being grateful for things, doing dishes, paying your bills on time, making your bed, all these things are way more important than finding morel mushrooms. And when you see these people posting these pictures of these huge hauls, hundreds, thousands of morels, and you feel bad about yourself, it's just FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. And I get it because I experience this from time to time, but I remind myself that people who find morels, they're not enlightened. You know, finding these mushrooms doesn't grant enlightenment to anyone. Yes, it's rewarding. There are lots of great memories associated with finding morels, but at the end of the day, you have to come home and do all the mundane tasks that are still associated with being a human being in the 21st century. If you are having trouble finding morels, what I encourage you to do is look for other spring mushrooms, because there are lots of mushrooms that are out there this time of year, depending on where you live. So where I live, other edible mushrooms include oyster mushrooms, various ink cap mushrooms, wood ear mushrooms, dry-eyed saddle mushrooms, wine caps, and many others that I'm probably forgetting right now. Also, look for edible plants this time of year because there are lots of great spring edibles out there, including wild leeks or ramps, fiddlehead ferns, Dame's rocket, which is one of my favorite spring greens, stinging nettles, and lots of other edible greens. Now, one thing that I frequently mention in my videos, if you're having trouble finding something out in nature, is to not look for that particular thing. And it sounds counterintuitive, like how can you find something if you're not looking for it? But for those of you who have stumbled upon amazing things in nature, you know that this happens a lot. You're not looking for something, but you find something amazing. So there are many other things that we can do outside. You know, we can go foraging for plants like I mentioned, foraging for other edible mushrooms, but also just hiking, just going for a walk. We can go hunting, we can go fishing, we can go botanizing. I remember last year I was looking for ferns, and I got into an area and I started finding morels in that area. And I had no idea that I would find morels. I wasn't looking for them, but they just happened to be there. Ultimately, what I can encourage you to do is to treat every experience looking for morel mushrooms as an opportunity to learn something. So even if we don't find mushrooms that look like these, we can ask ourselves, did I learn anything at all? Did I learn anything about the slope of the land? Did I learn anything about the valley? Anything about the birds that are singing right now? Anything about the trees? Anything about the lichens on the trees? You know, it's easy to walk away from the woods after a 4-hour morel hunt with nothing that looks like this and think we got skunked, or that we found nothing at all, didn't have a good time at all. But maybe it's because we're asking the wrong question. Maybe if we ask the question, how did I connect to the woods today? And we answer that question with, well, I learned something. Then I think we should congratulate ourselves for having a successful day in the woods. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. I encourage you to subscribe to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel and to head on over to learnyourland.com and sign up for the email newsletter so that we can stay in touch. Thank you again for watching. I will see you on the next video.